Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Our program today is going to be, I think it's going to be a great one. It's going to be addressing a subject that has been sort of addressed as well, in the subjects of mythology. I know that my good friend Will Lynn, Dr. Will Lynn, to you, Richard, he has a PhD in mythology and mythological studies. We've talked about this subject. Well, we're going to talk about this subject with our very special guest, returning for the fourth time on our program, and quite honestly, in less than 2 years. She was on 3 times in 2023, which I am so grateful for you being with us here. Her name is Judy Wilkins-Smith, and we're going to talk today about a subject that I hope you folks find interesting. I know I am, and it has to do with awakening your superhero. We're going to get into that as we open up the doors to this conversation. Welcome back to the program, Judy.
Hi, Richard. It is great to be back.
Well, I love having returning guests because we get to sort of almost pick up where we left off. We're going to talk, of course, about how to find your life's purpose and ignite your power as we talk about what is probably referred to in mythology more so than anywhere else as sort of the hero's journey. That's one way of looking at it, I guess. We all have events that happen in our lives, Judy, that we feel really good about, that makes us feel how I don't want to say necessarily powerful, but a case in point, Veterans Day 1999, I was producing a 4-hour morning show for a gentleman by the name of Austin Hill. And the plan was, of course, that we were going to have all kinds of wonderful military, dignitaries and senators and this and that and the other thing. And he was going to interview them. And we were going to be talking up, of course, Veterans Day and honoring the vets and so forth. And the program director for 3 or 4 days earlier says, look, we need to sit down and we need to talk about this because Austin, who is incredibly intelligent. Oh, this guy, he's like a human computer, right? But doesn't show a lot of emotion on the air. So we wanted to see if we could make him come across as a little bit more human. Not that there was really anything wrong with him. It was just, so we, all of a sudden he starts to cry. He starts to break down a little bit. You can hear the shaking in his voice. And the show ends. And the first thought that went through my mind was, well, the PD wanted us to make him have a little bit more emotion, but we didn't want to make him cry. Anyway, the PD comes into the control room where I am, stands between me and the glass into the other studio where I can see Austin, puts his hand across the console to me, and I'm standing already, and I'm feeling pumped because it was like a perfect show. One of those perfect shows, you just feel so good.
Right.
Puts his hand across the console and says, 4 stars. And I was already up here, and I went up a little higher when he said that. I felt it was seminal moments for me that has stayed with me. I even have a CD of the audio files of those 4 hours. I've never gone back to listen to them, but it's just kind of nice to have that moment in time. And I just felt incredible. Those are the kinds of moments in our lives, aren't they? That when we do something, it's not where we are in terms of, well, I was there when this happened or that. No, we're involved. We're doing something. And we know that we did the right thing, the ethical thing. And it created so much more than, shall we say, the sum of its parts. But it is... And there's no real, maybe there's a little ego attached, but we know we did a good thing. We contributed to, shall we say, the zeitgeist. Is that kind of what we're talking about that helps us then to move forward, to find these other elements, purpose and power?
I think so. What you're talking about is you had a head, heart, gut alignment. Your head said yes, your heart said yes, your gut said yes. Everything was aligned. You were in a state of coherence, and you were also just standing, what we call standing in the field. So you were open to what was going to happen. There was chemistry happening, and off you went. That's really tapping into the superhero part of you, and every one of us has it. It's also no coincidence that you see so many people going to things like Comic-Con. Why? Because they know there is that inherent part, but they can't tap into it. And when they go to something like that, they actually get to interact with it and go, this is me. And we think they're weird, but maybe they have a point.
Mm, I love it. I love it. And this is a little different than, say, using the sports analogy, being in the zone, although there's a similarity there.
No, I think it's pretty similar. The
Oh,
being
okay.
in the zone, no, the being in the zone place is, and here's the element that you need to be in the zone. You've got to have an elevated emotion, a higher emotion, and you've got to be completely present. Those two are your very strong pieces in the mix. If you're completely present and your mind isn't going elsewhere and you're not multitasking with your brain, and you are in the moment and you're doing what you need to do in your head, heart, gut coherence, you are in a super state. And so the super states are what we look for, because we know when we're in a super state that we feel really, really good. We feel like we're at home. Suddenly, that's what we've been looking for all along. Those are also what cause the pops through to what people would call the aha moments or the other dimensions. What you were talking about was you had an aha moment. You had a 4-hour aha moment when that sort of shaking started to happen. And when you facilitated it as well as you did, and that person could feel completely safe, they could play along with you. So the two of you were in the middle of an aha moment at one time. So that's what, when actors talk about having chemistry, that's what they're talking about. They're present, they're in an elevated state of emotion, and they are just doing what they do best. That's you as a superhero. I think the other thing is people think that a superhero is somebody who walks up to the car and tosses it over his shoulder or twirls it around in the air. That's not it. The superhero is really the super being. It's you being in your elevated state of being. It's no longer being in the everyday state that we think we're supposed to be in.
Is it what is the possibility that one can achieve uh that state, shall we call it, on a regular basis? I know that, for example, someone who is happy all the time might want to consider some counseling or therapy, because this is, I don't know that it's possible to be happy all the time. I mean, I'm an optimist, okay, but I have those days that are not as great as the day before.
And what do we do when we have people who really are happy? We send them for counseling.
Hmm.
Instead of saying, how do you do that? We think they need counseling. So yeah, it's possible to achieve that on a regular basis. But for you to achieve that on a regular basis, your life has got to be, or what you're working on has to be more exciting than where you are right now, so that you're continually moving. Doesn't matter how much, doesn't matter how little. As long as you're moving, you're doing something. And in those super states, in fact, sometimes you don't even have to move. I mean, literally, physically, you don't have to move. You can sit down, you can close your eyes, you can meditate, and you can go into that super state. And you can take that with you for the rest of the day. And it's almost as though you've had a moment of magic and it starts to drift off, like if you watch somebody blow smoke rings, there's perfect smoke ring, and then it starts to dissipate and you wish you could hold it. You can, but our natural state then is to go into resistance, which means we can't hold it. So I said to somebody this morning, if the universe were to give us two words to be able to grow and to move and to achieve those states, what would they be? Gratitude, relax. Because the minute you relax, you get your foot off the brake, and the universe has ways to come in, and you have ways to interact. There are times when you talk about what you had. There are times when you will find yourself going, I know I just had an interaction with the universe. This was incredible. Wow. Somebody else said to me the other day that awe has been identified as a separate emotion, and it makes sense. When you're in a state of awe, that's your super state. That's when you're starting to enter the superhero space.
We're talking with Judy Wilkins-Smith. She's a renowned, world-renowned, actually, systemic work and constellation expert. What is a constellation expert? You into astronomy?
Oh, I love that. I love that you asked that question, because it's kind of the first thing everybody asks me. What constellation? Are you a Leo or a Virgo or what? No. So in systemic work and constellations, what it means is a grouping of elements within a home base. So for example, all the members of a family, that'll create a constellation. All the members of an office, that will create a constellation, or a company. What we do for a constellation is you take something that you want to look at, something that's kind of noodling around in your brain, and we identify all the relevant elements of that. And then I say to you, if we're in a room, like when I teach at Disney in November, I will say to the people there, pick a representative for the different elements, and then give me a spatial representation of what that looks like to you. Well, now all of a sudden it's out of your head and it's in front of you where you can see it. You can actually speak to the different parts. You can hear it. You can hear what you're saying. You can feel it. And because you're using multiple senses, that creates a very strong, very charged, in the moment, embodied aha experience. And people come away very blown away, because it's the first time they've actually gotten to see the family system or the issue or whatever it is in 3D instead of here, and they can work with it.
Well, it sounds to me like we would gain an awful lot by maybe I don't know, spending some time at Judy Wilkins Smith.com, Judy Wilkins Smith.com. That hyphen throws me every time. But we'll be linked to your website so people can just click on it and they won't have to type that in. We had you on before talking, of course, about your emotional blueprint, among other things. You also deal with, the conversation surrounding our emotions and DNA and so forth, and the whole biochemical thing. And I find it extremely fascinating. And you've also written a number of books. Well, obviously, this particular
You
one.
Richard.
Go ahead.
Here it is.
There it is, folks. There it is. The hidden power of the DNA. In your DNA is what that book is there.
And
yes.
That's written so that people who are into genealogy at all can grab a copy of that book, and they're going to see why I am the way, let's try that again. Why I am the way I am.
It's catchy. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So why I am the way I am and what to do about that. Do I want to stay this way, or is there something that needs to change?
Yeah.
Why do I feel this way? Why is it so strong? This is in your genealogy. So genealogy 1.0 is where I belong. Genealogy 2.0 is what are the events that happened in my family system. And genealogy 3.0 is, okay, so this is who I am. What do I do with it? And how do I tap into my superhero?
Yeah. What's the difference between, I'll put it in this vernacular, what's the difference between a regular hero and a superhero?
Simply recognizing who you are. A regular hero is something that we see. They run out into the middle of the road, they rescue a kitten or a squirrel or a person or whatever it is, and we go, oh, that's a hero. But we don't stop to think about being a hero in here every single day. We don't stop to think that we are super beings who are capable of creating super states. Now, and it's simple things, Richard. It's if you are a very kind person, maximize it. If you are a very happy person, maximize it. If you're a very grateful person, maximize that, because people look at that and they go, what is that? Why is that person so different? You're very capable of going on an adventure and achieving remarkable things when you tap into your superhero. And everybody has it. Everybody.
Yeah. I was paid a beautiful compliment, but at a very strange time. It was actually Valentine's Day, probably 5, 6, I don't know, maybe even 7 years ago. And the morning man at the station that I was working for, um, he was a guy who, as an older, he wasn't a lot older than me, but he was older than me. He'd been around the road a few times, and he had a sort of a curmudgeonly attitude. But he got to a point in his career where he says, "I don't want to do this anymore." That was the day, with no notice of any kind. He said at the end of his morning show stint, "I'm done. I quit. I'm not going to do this anymore." But that wasn't the compliment. The compliment that he paid me when he left, he came back to turn in his key, and he said, "You are one of the happiest people I have ever met. Don't lose that." And I thought, coming from this guy, wow, as curmudgeonly as he was most of the time, for him to see that in me. And I mean, and it's not like I didn't already know that I'm a happy guy. And I like to think that I'm smiling most of the time, singing occasionally, humming. Richard, would you keep it down in there? We're trying to work. Sorry. um, I'm an optimistic guy, glass half full. Although now I say, what's the glass half full of? What beverage would I want in there?
I
It'd
love
be
it.
mighty tasty, mighty tasty. Anyway, so that's one of the things that I hold near and dear to my heart is the fact that here's an individual who, wasn't happy most of the time, and yet, from what I understand, people have seen him around, have conversed with him, and so forth, associated with him since his leaving. He was a little on the heavy side when he was working, lost a lot of weight, and appears to be even happier than before. So it's like, okay, I would say, in spite of the situation that he left me in to cover the next day and so forth, he actually, I believe he did make the right choice that then made him happy. To use him as an example, is that part of the challenge that we have as individuals in connecting with our inner, shall we say, superhero,
We
that
don't dare
we don't,
indulge it.
what's that?
We don't dare indulge it. We don't go to that superhero because it could be greedy, it could be indulgent. No, it's not indulgent. When you really get into the superhero space, let me put it this way: there are far too few of us going after our dreams. Far too few.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says, well, yeah, that's fine. You've got to put food on the table. Yes, and if you put food on the table and less of your butt on the couch, you will find space for what it is that you really want to do. Because I have people who say, well, yeah, your job seems nice. I wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, and I said to them, it didn't just happen. I had plenty of nights sitting in the bathtub and there were as many tears as there was water from anything else. But I kept going until I could segue from the one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to do that and to get into what it is that makes you happy and fulfilled, because the minute your cup is full, you'll start to help others with theirs.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important. And then the other thing is to say, how far can I push the envelope? Somebody said to me, she was really challenging me the other day, and she said, you're always saying, how big are you willing to be? Not everybody needs to be big. What's this big thing? This big is too much. And I said, no, it's not. If you want to really be of service to the universe, you've got to be willing to be the biggest version of yourself possible, because the universe can only deal with what you will give it. So how much are you giving it to work with?
Yeah. I know that in a successive counseling sessions, the suggestions was made to me because of a lot of things that I was sharing in the sessions. Why don't you start writing down and making a list? I said, well, okay, I can do that. And then she explained. She says, because when you make a list of those things that are spinning around in your head, you get them out of your head. They aren't spinning in there anymore. Now they're on the paper. Okay.
Exactly. And then if you dimensionalize them, now they're in a constellation, which means you can also bring them to resolution. So on the paper is a good first step.
Yeah. Well, I started out with 1, 2, 3. And when I was finished with the list, or at least at that moment when I was finished with the list, I had 13 items. All right. I've only crossed off one of them thus far. And I've had the list for 3 months. And yet I'm not, I'm sorry.
A whole 3 months.
A whole 3 months. Right. Exactly. And it brings to mind a conversation I had with my younger brother following a reunion that we went to back in Arizona. We were walking in the desert out past the Elks Lodge down between Coolidge and Florence, Arizona. And we were talking, and I was sharing with him where I was coming from and the philosophies, da 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 da. And his response to that was, well, gee, it's about time you got it. Now, I was 33 at the time. And I told him, I said, Mike, it's not when you get it, but that you get it. So this list of 13, which is now 12, it may take me 12 years to go through, and I may add more to it as time goes on. I mean, now I'm hip deep in finishing my book, Choices, which I've been working on since the initial the impetus back in 2001. And it's like, hey, I also believe very strongly in divine right timing. How does that play into an individual's getting their butt off of the couch and quote unquote putting food on the table and beginning to put together those things that not only are important to them, bring them joy and happiness and fulfillment, but are also part of their life's purpose.
Oh yeah. And look, it's got to be an adventure. This I've discovered. For me, and I teach this a lot. If I'm going to go and do something, it's got to be a bit of a stretch, not a crack or a break, but it's got to be a stretch. But I've got to be so intrigued by the possibility attached to it that I can't stand myself. Because if I'm that intrigued, I'm going to get past all of my excuses and all of my limitations, and I'm going to go and do it. And I think for me, case in point was teaching at Disney World. Everybody who knows me knows that Disney World is my favorite place in the world. And I make sure that I always have a little bit of Disney around me. Anyway, so I was on vacation because we have timeshare there, which is a whole other story. But I sat there and I thought, I love this so much. I teach. What if I were to teach a class there? And I went over to the place that I wanted to teach it at, and I said, "Could you show me the room?" She did, and I already started to feel the possibilities. It was like, wow, wow, wow. When you get the goosebumps. How much? And they said, "Well, you'll need to put down 15,000 deposit." And I was like, that shut that down very fast. Like 15,000 is a lot of money to just put down for a deposit.
Yeah.
I'm a solopreneur. No, we're not doing that. But I really want to. But we're not doing that. But I really want to. But I really want to. Well, I'm now doing my 10th one, I think, this year. And it was scary, but it was so good. I mean, I walked in there and I did the event, and I walked away going, I've actually taught a class at Disney. And not only that, when people come to those events that I teach at Disney, they each get magic every day. Every day there's a little piece of magic for them. And by the time they walk out, they're in a very different space. So I get to make a little magic, teach in a magic place, in the heart of magic. That was the adventure. different people, different adventures, but you've got to learn to go for your adventures. That's when you get into superhero mode and you stop being, oh, well, that's the way it is. And you get into, but what is possible?
Mm-hmm.
What's possible? What can I do? It's very exciting stuff.
This actually ties in, Judy Wilkins-Smith, with the DNA question or the subject, because the DNA is nothing more than information. That's all it is. It's just information. Uh, do you recognize the possibility that that DNA also contains the information that you have carried with you, possibly not just through your from your ancestors, but maybe even from past lives?
So I'll tell you my answer to that. I don't know if there's such a thing as a past life. I don't know if we reincarnate. But here's the deal. I always tell everybody, I do the very best that I can in any situation. Because on the off chance that there is, I do not want to repeat that lesson. Thank you very much.
I took that test already and I passed. Leave me alone.
I passed the test. The other piece, though, is even if we don't reincarnate, I will tell you that patterns do.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know. None of us know or knows for a fact. We have glimpses, but just on the off chance, I'm going to hedge my bets by doing the very best I can. And I do know that those lessons or the patterns absolutely do reincarnate. They travel from generation to generation.
Yeah. You know, what's also interesting about the DNA and just our overall biology, our chromosomes and so forth, I have had my DNA tested. My sisters have had their DNA tested. My mother has had her DNA tested. I don't know if my brother has. I don't know if my father did before his passing. But what is so intriguing to me is that my four sisters and brother and I all came from the same set of parents.
Right.
And yet our DNA exhibits totally different connections to different races on the planet. Mine is the majority. I will say this: I'm 1% European Jew. I love that. I absolutely love it. I'm not a practicing Jew, but I'm thinking about it. But the majority of my DNA test shows that I am connected to a race of humans that when I was living in Arizona, I stayed away from because I thought, they're very private people. They don't need white men involved in their stuff. And so I'm going to respect and keep my distance. Turns out in my DNA, I am native Northern, Central, and Southern American Indian. Who knew? Well, now I do. But if the DNA, which is nothing more than information, is
Right.
what it is, shows the patterns and so forth, or at least can help to reveal where to find those patterns. If it can be, how can it be written over in those areas? Again, maybe this is dealing with the chromosomes, not so much DNA.
No. This is beautiful because it
Okay.
can be rewritten.
Okay.
And my two books will tell you how, but let me tell you briefly.
Okay.
We're talking epigenetics at the moment. In other words, if there is an incident that is significant enough and carries enough emotional weight, it can actually create an imprint on your DNA. And that becomes a blueprint for subsequent generations of actions, interactions, reactions. They all start to exhibit the same patterns and behaviors. And that can then influence your physical DNA and your health and well-being. How do we rewrite that? That's the super being part. And it's not difficult. It's literally having a look at what bothers me and what is my deepest desire. So what bothers me? This side. What is my deepest desire? This side. If I look at this one is the pattern that's trying to stop. It's done. it's no longer relevant. What was a solution in one generation has now become a problem in this generation. When we can look at this pattern, we can use it as a cue or a clue to what we don't want to do, and then what we do want to do. And when we start to create new patterns consciously, we start to rewire and refire in the brain. We start to rewire the head-heart-gut connection, and you literally rewrite what's there. Now your emotional DNA is no longer the same, and you're also not stuck repeating ancient patterns. You're fully present, and your future is no longer predictable. You're now in a new dimension. You're doing something very different. So you, Richard, can rewrite that entire piece to where it also, you can understand with insight that what looks like a villain may not have been. I ask people all the time, which villains in your life should you be thanking? Because they've made you move. They've made you change. They've made you do it differently. Who prompted your change?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that you want to be interested in. But absolutely, you can rewrite that.
All right. But now here's a twist on that. You're
Okay.
familiar. You're familiar with the process called the CRISPR that will will alter DNA for more biological reasons. For example, the 60 Minutes piece where they did on CRISPR, they were able to eliminate from this one individual sickle cell anemia.
Yes.
Great. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. This person is no longer going to be in pain for the rest of their lives. That's great. However, here's the question. And if it maybe it doesn't apply in your example and in what you do in the work you do. What are the unintended consequences of removing those particular elements of the DNA? Now you have a vacuum. I don't know that they've actually replaced it with anything. They've just removed it, and now there's a vacuum that has to be filled. And I don't know how physically the DNA functions. If it they used to somebody told me years ago that if you lose a tooth, then the other teeth are going to shift. Well, that isn't true, because if you still have the root in your jaw, the teeth aren't going to move.
No, but then you haven't lost the tooth.
Well, what I mean by that, well, the top of the tooth. In other words, if it breaks, I've had that happen.
If it's the top of the tooth, it won't, because you've still got the tooth.
That's true. That is true. So anyway, but at the same time, the other teeth are also rooted in the jawbone. So how are they supposed to move? But anyway, so the I don't know how the DNA functions in that regard, but are there any unintended consequences of rewriting the DNA as you have described it for accessing that superhero and finding our life's purpose and our personal power?
There are absolutely unintended consequences. I have many people who come in and say, I'm going to do this work. Nobody in my family will ever, ever, ever do this work. They're not going to shift. This is just way out of their league. And then I start to see the first family member come in, and the second family member come in, and the third family member come in. Mm-hmm. Because the minute you shift one element, everything else has no, it has no alternative but to begin shifting, because it's got to reorientate. So the minute it reorients, everything else starts to reorient. So yeah, the minute you shift, that's when other things start to reorient as well. And that's when we talk about becoming a great force for good. If you do it strong enough and well enough, everybody else goes, well, I want some of whatever Richard's eating, please, thank you very much. Mm-hmm. It's the same idea. Now, with a crisp and physical one, I would want to know, I think, look, you could say that there are going to be unintended consequences. There may be another disease that pops up. I'm not sure. But we have to move to find out.
Yeah. And there are even those who will use the argument. And again, I'm not on either side of the argument myself. It's just raising the question. But they have this argument on the one hand that with all of the scientific and medical and biological research and studies and innovations and evolution in that process that have come along, well, how do you know that this wasn't the way God intended us to evolve? And then, of course, the other side is, well, but how do you know that it isn't?
Yes, but here's the deal. if God didn't intend us to evolve, we'd still all be sitting in a cave.
Well, that's true. That's true. I would agree with you.
We're
And the other,
going to evolve, and we need to quit being so scared of it.
sure. But what about this question that I raise when I hear about these kinds of innovations, discoveries, research? Just because we can, does that mean we should? Now, in your example,
Yes.
I would say absolutely, because to me, when I use the term unintended consequences to altering our DNA through your process, that is something that you are choosing to do intentionally for the
In order
betterment
to
of
elevate.
self, to raise high, you're right, exactly, to raise the consciousness. So they're unknown intentional consequences. How about that?
Unknown intentional consequences. You're still going to arrive back at, if I've chosen to move and I've chosen to elevate, yes, there's going to be a vacuum, because who I was before, just like you described, who I was before is not who I am now. Right. So you're going to have a bit of a vacuum here. Here's what happens. Because there's a vacuum here, somebody else goes, well, oh, there's a space over there. And they hop in. What happens next? They start to move in the same direction.
Yeah.
So yes, you're going to have unintended, intentional consequences. If I'm doing it for the greater good, great. You're always going to get some doofus who's going to try the other end of the stick. You know it, and I know it. Some fool is going to use it for not such a good thing. Frankly, my suggestion for that is we should have a different planet for some fools.
Well, I think Elon Musk is working on that, and that may be what the solution will be.
That could be good, because we have a bunch of some fools who should go there at the moment.
But at the
know
same,
that the tragedy, or the not even the tragedy, but the kind of tickling thing, is that if we would all tap into the superhero, if we would all start intentionally elevating and understanding that every word, every thought, every feeling, every action we take has an effect, we could do unbelievably wonderful things in this world and have a good time doing it.
you know, you in terms of having those strange ones be shipped off to another planet, you also made the comment earlier that, hey, you know, we can learn from them. We learn, for example,
We do.
I use the term this way, and I put this whole thing in apolitical context. Number 45 is up to his eyeballs in issues that he's dealing with in his life. And I have made this statement to a number of people. Do you know why? Do you know why he's dealing with all of this stuff? Oh, well, because this group hates him and that group hates him. No, it has nothing to do with them hating him. It has to do with the choices that he has made and the personality that he has that has placed him where he's at. And you can label it as politically motivated, emotionally, however you want to phrase it. His choices have placed him where he is right now. Whether you like it or not, doesn't matter. That's his role.
Absolutely. And with that role, he could do, number 45 could do great good or great damage. So far, we're seeing evidences of one and not the other.
Yeah.
And then the point is, if you're going to stir mankind up, do you want to stir it up for good?
Yeah.
And unity, or division and hate?
Yeah.
And you've got to choose, because that's what we're going to live with. Yeah. It's not that it's good. It's not that it's bad. It is that it is. That is what we will get.
Very good. Very good. Judy Wilkins-Smith is my guest, and that's the website. There's a hyphen between Wilkins and Smith. We'll be linked to her website as well, so we hope that you'll go there and check out the works that she has available, find out more about your DNA. Maybe this will spur you to, I don't know, do a DNA test and so forth. I know that on the one hand, I think it's fascinating. They do tend to, your DNA, I stand corrected, because we're already talking about changing one's DNA. But on a conscious level, not unconscious.
Right.
So, but from a genetics or genealogical standpoint, I don't think that one's DNA changes over the course of time. And that, for example, what was it? I'm trying to remember the company that we went through now, Ancestry.com. I could submit another sample And it would be, from a genealogical standpoint, it's going to be the same.
I'd
But
be curious. I
yeah,
would be curious to see, because if you look at the Great Dutch Hunger Winter, when they had nothing to eat for 3 months, they tested a whole population of women, and the women exhibited elevated PTSD markers, but so did their children, and so did their children's children. Now, if you were to then bring in somebody who would work with them, or somebody from that group who gets their superhero on and says, I'm not doing this anymore. I know we all carry this. I'm changing it. And they start to meditate, get really beautiful. They have good eating habits. And the body starts to work with them. They're going to change what's there. So it's more about the markers that they're going to change, which then either switches on or switches off.
Yeah.
That capability we know we have. And if we know we have it, what are we doing? We should be getting out there and maximizing what we have.
Yeah. Now, I've never really played, even throughout my entire life, with save a short period of time when I was 19, did I play the victim. Born legally blind, 19, out of high school, wanting to drive a car, but the state won't let me because I'm legally blind, so on and so on and so on. And I'm not going to college for about 6 months, so living at home with my parents. Wonderful. And basically saying, look, I didn't label me legally blind. The state did. So this is on them, you know. And of course, for a short period of time, I collected disability. And then I got off of it and I started moving forward. And again, I've for the most part. But then in the early 80s, I started going through these personal growth programs, which were focused on dealing with victimhood. And well, this is mom and dad's fault. You know, my brothers, my sisters, etc. On and on and on. Then we moved into the subject matter in the late 80s of codependency, that conversation. In the 90s, and this is my experience, moved into interdependence. That was that, so to speak, final phase. I'm thinking, oh, okay, great. I'm 100% responsible for my life. I don't care what anybody else says. No, God didn't do it and the devil didn't do it. I did it. Whatever it is, I am responsible. The example of a woman being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. You're not, oh, I'm 73% pregnant. No,
You're not.
doesn't work that way. So we moved through the 1990s into the 21st century, and everything's going along pretty well. And sure, we had that little kerfuffle financially in the early years, 2007, 8, 9, and got out of that, moved on and on. And then in 2015, what rears its ugly head once again, after 35 years, victimhood.
Oh, yeah. And it is now a nasty little being that's
Oh,
floating out.
and I'm looking for the exterminator who can who can eliminate the concept of hello there. Yes, no, she's not O'Connor pest control, but a far much better pest control, because that, I mean, and here's what happens here's what happened in 2015 when I heard the message of victimhood once again. I said, wait a minute. I already played this game. I am not going to play it again. We are, if you want to do it collectively, we are where we are as a society, whether it's a family, a town, a city, a state, or a nation. We are where we are because of what we did, not because of what they did. Okay? They're doing their thing, functioning off of their DNA, their information.
Right.
I'm not going to play that game anymore. And that's why I find it so fascinating in talking with you about this whole aspect of not just finding your life's purpose, which we will talk about as well, but that personal power that a lot of people interpret a lot of times as control. And yeah, there is an element there, but that's not the definition of personal power that you're talking about.
No, the personal power and control and victimhood. Hey, victimhood, I want to tell you, you just saw my head drop. It drives me crazy, because really it doesn't matter what's happening. You're on a life. You're in the middle of a life. You have a life. This is your life. You get to choose what to do with that life. Sometimes the choices are not great. You still get to choose. I had a woman who said to me, Don't you dare talk to me about being a victim. I am a victim. I was raped. And my life will never be the same. I said, no, your life will never be the same again. It may be better or it may be worse. Which one do you want to choose?
Mm-hmm.
And she looked at me like I was crazy. We are going to have events. It's part of the journey, people. It's called a life.
Mm-hmm.
What you do with the events is going to take you down or it's going to take you up. That's part of the journey. It's called a life. And it's called choices.
Mm-hmm.
What choices are you making? When you hear about somebody who came from the projects and suddenly they're the golden child or the great hope, it's not because they had this something that nobody else did. It's because they woke up and they started choosing. They chose to study. They chose to not do the different things that were there.
Mm-hmm.
They chose to be separate or different. They chose to rise up. It's a lot about choice.
Yeah.
And when you dare say that, people have a fit because being a victim has now become a requirement for success.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I constantly am looking and listening to those people who want to hate, I guess that's the best word, specific races. And I think of two examples. Number one is Black Wall Street. I believe it was in Arkansas. I can't remember if it was Arkansas or Oklahoma, back in the 1800s. And the stories have finally been brought out that the white community was so incensed, so hateful about the success of these former slaves with what is referred to as Black Wall Street. They killed everybody and burned the town down instead of applauding them for their success. The other example,
kill each other for success. That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
No kidding. Then the second example is of the Jews and the allegations that the Jews control the media. They control radio and the TV and movies and so forth. And I'm sitting here going, well, what did your ancestors do? Okay.
Well,
why didn't they do this? Why aren't you applauding them for their foresight, for their creativity, for their ability to do this?
And why are you not learning? If you want to be there, learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the minute somebody is successful, we want to take them down. It's stupid. It's completely the reverse. If somebody is successful, study what they're doing, ask what they're doing, do what they're doing.
Yeah. Did you hear? Yeah. Did you hear the story of Einstein in a classroom? And he was writing on the chalkboard his multiplication tables. 9 times 1 is 9, 9 times 2 is 18, etc., etc. 9 times 9 is 81. 9 times 10 is 92. Up until that point, the classroom was quiet, and all of a sudden they burst into laughter and criticism. And he turned around and he said, "Isn't it interesting that 9 out of 10 times I have the correct answer? And it wasn't until the 10th time, 1/10 of the equations, that the criticisms came." Making the point that rather than looking at the accomplishments, all we do is look. And it's like Edison also. He never thought he ever failed when he was inventing the light bulb.
Exactly.
What he found, over 900 ways that the light bulb didn't work.
He knew it was there. He just had to figure out the how.
Yeah. And I've done that in my life, not making light bulbs, mind you, but in making decisions, thinking, "Now this is okay. We can do this. This is what we'll do." Da, 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 da. And then we get down the road and oops, okay, I got to regroup here. Okay, we got to fix the situation I've created here. We got to fix it, and now I got to make a new protocol, a new decision here, a new choice. And now everything is starting to flow the way it's supposed to flow. But I never have taken the position, with that exception of that one time when I was 19, I've never taken the position of being a victim.
Doesn't help you.
It's just, I mean, what's the point? what is the point in doing that? It's such a waste of energy.
Well, at the
And that's
moment, the
there's the
person
other
is still
thing.
paying me money. If
Yeah.
I'm a victim, you better pay me money.
Well,
But the
see, there's
problem with that is at some point you're going to realize you will either give that money away or the next generation will lose it. It's
yeah,
ill gains.
exactly. And you raise an interesting point when it comes to this conversation that we're having across the globe of reparations. And I saw a piece the other day that I thought was absolutely stunning in its example. Okay, all right. We'll start with the slaves. We'll start with the blacks from Africa. Okay, we'll pay reparations. All right. And the criterion for reparations is you have to have been oppressed. All right. Well, I'm of Irish descent. All right. But I'm also of Indian descent. So I get double reparations for what happened to my ancestors. And the list goes on, which means that every person on the planet will receive reparations.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
You
Because,
didn't
and
get
basically
nothing.
you're saying
Our
that we're all
ancestors-
victims.
Yeah, no, we've got to stop. It's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, all of this conversation you and I are having has nothing to do with being left or right.
No,
It has nothing to do with that.
you. And are you going to elevate the planet or are you going to dump it in the
Yeah.
garbage can?
Yeah. I loved what Neil deGrasse Tyson said in one of these little short videos. Oh, I love listening to that guy because he makes so much sense. And he was talking about how Elon wants to colonize the Mars, which, hey, we're explorers by nature. That's a wonderful thing. I mean, we've had some mishaps along the way, but that's part of the deal with exploring. And he says, yeah, okay, I think it's a great idea. We could terraform Mars, we could live there and so forth. It's going to be a bit of a challenge. And he kind of went through a few of those challenges. But he says, if you can spend billions of dollars, maybe trillions of dollars to get to Mars and terraform it, why couldn't you spend probably a lot less to terraform Earth and return it to the way it was? That doesn't mean tear down the cities. As I've used this example, and it's a very short one, let's just clean up our home, please. There's no science involved. Let's just clean up our home. And I loved the fact that he put it in that context that, hey, he wants to spend that money on exploring Mars, go for it. But there is no planet B. This is it. This is our home. And we need to clean it up. Judy Wilkins-Smith is my guest, and we are talking, we're talking about a lot of stuff, DNA and victimhood. And I came up, I didn't really come up with it. I think it's always been there. But as I was going through that process, victimhood and codependency and so forth, I thought, okay, well, what is the natural end to this process? And it was a new ism called interdependentism. And even Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about how, hey, we are all connected. And he used the example of the molecules of oxygen that we inhale and so forth. We're breathing the same molecules that have been breathed in and out since man has been on the planet.
Right.
Now, if that is not interconnectedism, if you will.
Absolutely.
I don't know what is. And he also has made the comment, and this maybe was Carl Sagan, who made the statement that we are all made of the same stardust. And even in the Bible, it talks about how ashes to ashes, dust to dust, that Adam was made from the dust of the ground. Well, where'd the dust come from? And so on and so forth. So it's like, how can you have any kind of emotion other than love for your brother or your sister when you're made from the same stuff that they are? It boggles the mind, doesn't it? I want to throw one more monkey wrench into the equation and see what you think about this, if this even has any relevance to our conversation, because it comes up. The universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride. What is your perspective on AI, artificial intelligence, and where it's going?
That's easy. I think, now, this is just what I think. I think it's a little bit like the Industrial Revolution, where we said it's going to kill everybody. They won't have jobs. Nobody's going to be able to make a living. I think we're just seeing a reorientation of what we can do. Now, are there going to be people who will use it for not good. Of course, there are going to be people who will do that. But if we do what's right, like we've spoken about, and we use AI, we can really start to elevate ourselves into adventure. If we've got help to take care of the slog, we can go along for the adventure. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good way to look at it. People are using it. It's here. It's here. So for goodness sake, use it wisely, use it well, and don't be a fool.
I couldn't agree with you more. I have taken the position when having it thrust upon me through different websites. For example, Zoom, which is what we're communicating through, wants me to activate the AI companion. I have no idea what the companion is there for. I really don't. And so I have not activated it. I do not need AI to help me to write my book, so I haven't activated that. I do not need AI to help me to come up with the questions that I ask on this program. That's the universe's job, okay? That job's been taken, all right? Excellent. But I am sure that there will be applications that I may eventually incorporate AI into. You know, I'm not ruling it out, but I loved what Neil deGrasse Tyson said. He said, as far as the internet is concerned, he said AI will destroy the internet. Now, here's what's interesting, what you've already said in terms of our process of evolution and so forth. You use the example of the Industrial Revolution. We're still here. All right, we're still, a matter of fact, we're more are here now than we're back then. We're at 8.1 billion. So we haven't stopped growing. When we went into lockdown, not in 1919 or something like that with the Spanish flu. 1920.
Yes, okay.
All right. But when we went into the lockdown in 2020, which, by the way, was the year of perfect vision, ladies and gentlemen, that we promote, encouraging you to go within and listen to that still small voice, please. We did something as far as the generations alive at that time had never done with something like the influenza. And I'd been saying since the 70s, as a teenager, we could stop the influenza from spreading around the world every year, shut down the airlines 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. Okay. Oh, no, can't do that. That would devastate our economy. And so now I look back and go, well, let me ask you now, what do you think? Because we did it for months. We shut down the airlines, and yet this thing still spread like wildfire. Okay. Exactly. But we did something different this time. We didn't just keep running around doing our thing. We shut down almost virtually the entire globe, okay, in terms of movement.
Interesting, right?
Now, we did not know where we would wind up when we opened up again. We didn't know where we would be. And that was part of what I took great pleasure and joy in, not knowing the unknown destination, because we were doing something different. Because before, we were basically operating on an insane principle of doing the same thing over and over again, you know?
Yep.
So your example in regards to AI is that same thing where first there's the fear, and eventually it will become so commonplace and not innocuous and not dangerous and they're not going to kill us, regardless of what Isaac Asimov might have said in his books that, oh no, robots, they have a prime directive that says it will not kill its creator. And it's like, I don't know whether that's true or not. Doesn't matter. And if Neil deGrasse Tyson is correct that it will destroy the internet, well, the internet is only one part, and probably we will invent something else. We'll discover something else that's beyond the internet, right?
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think it's just fascinating to have these conversations. And I want to thank you so much, Judy Wilkins-Smith, for joining us here on the program. And is this conversation we're having about, finding our own inner superhero and so forth, in the form of a book at this time?
The Hidden Power in Your DNA touches on it, absolutely.
Okay.
And so does Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint. But maybe that's a new book.
I would, you take it and run with it. Okay. Just take it and run with it. Before we let you go, I want to ask you those three final questions, which of course they've changed. They've evolved over time.
I
And
love it.
I thank you so much for being with us. And I thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. I'll give you the preliminaries on our next program, but I want to get to these three final questions for our guest. And those three final questions start with this one. Who is Judy Wilkins-Smith?
Judy Wilkins-Smith is a curious wanderer and optimistic hoper that people will open their eyes and absolutely discover the superhero. It's there.
What gets you up in the morning?
Life, the cats, the dog, well, I don't have dogs, the cats, my family. I love it. And the adventure. How far can I go today?
And finally, what was your best day?
I think every day is a best day. I've had some not so best days. Honestly, what was my best day? Being born. I got to have an adventure. I get to have an adventure.
And it's exciting, and we don't know where it's going to go. And it does have its ups and downs, but that is part of life. And I thank you for sharing with us some of the ups here on the program. Thank you for being.
Richard, it's always such a pleasure to be with you.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.